Quando è nata nel 2003, la Porsche 911 GT3 RS ha sempre avuto un obiettivo molto chiaro, quello di offrire delle caratteristiche di guida che fossero il più vicino possibile a quelle di una Gran Turismo da competizione. Nei 19 anni della sua carriera se ne sono susseguite 5 di generazioni di GT3 RS e il loro cammino è stato un costante avvicinamento alle caratteristiche di guida di un modello da pista. Un cammino che, come potete vedere, culmina qui con questa sesta serie su base 992 che oggi andiamo a conoscere a fondo insieme al papà di tutte le Porsche GT, Andreas Preuninger. So, Mr. Preuninger, this is so nice to have you here with your latest baby. I would like you to walk us through some of the main features of the car, and I would like to start with the cooling system because it's so innovative and interesting.
And it's so obvious that it's different than it has been before, Fabio. That's at first glance noticeable. For the first time on a street car, we use a central radiator concept. Like in the race cars, like the GT3R or the RSR, we have one central cooling unit. And in the past, we had, on the predecessor of this one, 3 different radiators, but we had to free up some space for aerodynamical reasons on both sides of the car, so we decided to go with a central unit, like in a race car, vent everything through the front lid, and have only one system, which is lighter, which has to be more efficient because its surface is a little bit lower than if you have 3. And that was quite a challenge. It sits at 43 degrees of an angle, like in a race car, and it works brilliantly. And it helped to save weight, and it was an enabler for the whole aerodynamic, radical aerodynamic concept of the car.
Yeah, I can see this. I was taking a look at these front side blades. Do they work with the wheel arch? What's their role?
Oh, no, that's just design. I'm just kidding. As a matter of fact, everything you see here, every nook and cranny, every vent, every exit, every vein, every flap has a reason and has a function which was tested in the wind tunnel. We never spent so much time in the wind tunnel than with this car. So we really had a target here. Talking about that veins here, we consider the air in 3 sections aerodynamically. First, the air that's underneath the car. There's a whole new underbody with 14 different fins directing the air where we want to have it, where we want the cooling and where we don't need it to not cushion up the car and produce lift, which is not wanted. Then we have the middle section that we have here entering the cooling systems, entering the ducts for the brake. And we want the air to be very close to the car, to hug the car, to be as close as possible and accelerate the stream as best as we can in order to get lower resistance and create downforce. And this is what these veins are here for, and they guide the air around the wheel arches with a little pressure zone here, low pressure zone that rips actively the air out. We want to get the air out of the wheel well, because air that's trapped in the wheel well at high speeds, lifting the car up, that's not what we want. So we have to vent it here to make an exit here. We have to exit it here a little bit. Not the air we need for the brake cooling, but the air that's there that doesn't make any benefit for the car. And if you look at the door, which is another thing we have to talk about, it's the carbon fiber door for the first time. It has a different form than on a normal Carrera. So it's like on a GT1 from the past. Really open up the wheel arches here to vent here the air as good as possible and give the air as much guided funneling, not to stay too long in the wheel well.
Yes. Does it reduce the pressure inside the wheel arch as well?
Exactly. Wow. Yeah, that's what happens. And if you look at that, this is a race car. I mean, this car, especially the front, it looks more extreme than many race cars nowadays.
Yes.
And that comes from the aero system.
Yes. When I first saw the 992 GT3, I thought to myself, how could they go even further? But I was reading on your press release that you have specifically developed front suspension with kind of a drop shape to help the aerodynamics as well.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a shame you can't see it. I would like to have this transparent to look at these beautiful parts. It's a double wishbone front axle, like we have on the GT3. It works phenomenal, but no part is interchangeable with the GT3. We have here an aerodynamic element to this control arms, to the upper and lower wishbones, and even to the steering rod that have the shape of a wing, like the wing on the back.
Yeah.
Every part of the suspension produces its own downforce. We have 40 kilos more downforce on the front axle just because of these parts that we use in the suspension. And this is really an achievement because we always have to look for downforce at the front of the car because a wing at the back, I mean, I wouldn't say everybody can do it, but it's a lot easier on the back to create downforce than on the front. And you have to keep the car in balance, which on that car is about 30% in the front and the rest 70% at the back. And if you have a lot at the back and you can't produce 30% of what you can achieve in the back and the front, the car will be unbalanced. And so we looked for every possibility to get as much downforce as we can. And this control arms, this whole suspension works great. 40 kilos.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
And before moving to the back, you mentioned before the rear wing works in cooperation with the front splitter. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a good amount of research in terms of aerodynamics balance between the two axles, right?
That was a very, very high on the target list to have this car absolutely in perfect balance all the time, under braking, under accelerating, always. And what I said before, you have to keep the balance between front and rear, and we make so much downforce with this huge wing. Some people said, is this a surfboard? No, it's not. It's the father of all wings, I would say, and it works great, but you need some countermeasures in the front. So we freed up some space for aero modules here, which you can't see, but they are operated in synchronization with the rear flapper. You have a diffuser
so
that goes up and down, yeah, and it can move from 0 to the highest position in only a third of a second, wow, as does the rear wing. Yeah? And they're in synchronization, and we use this area to produce downforce. They have a real diffuser to accelerate the air, and that creates a lot of downforce and a lot more than what you could do without this aerodynamic active concept.
Yeah, I think it's time to move to the rear and to show this huge and so refined rear wing. Can you explain some of its main features, like this swan necks? Like, it's just mesmerizing.
Yeah, the wing was the talk of the town when we had the spy shots, and I think it looks a lot more beautiful than it was looking on the prototypes. And form follows function here. I mean, it's a swan neck. Like on the GT3, I explained it on the GT3 already, when we have the suction side, so the lower side of the wing devoid of any obstacles, so we have a more efficient wing. We don't need the same angle of attack for the same amount of downforce. So it's more efficient to fasten the wing like that, like in all race cars nowadays. The new thing is it's very high up. It's even if you look a little bit up,
yes,
on that direction, it's even when it's on the high position, a couple of millimeters higher than the roof line. We never had that before. So it sits in very clean air. There's no disturbance anymore, so it can work very efficiently. But the main thing that catches the eye are not these rams here, which are anodized. I love them. But what these rams are doing, so they can tilt the rear section of the wing and produce more or less downforce depending what the driving conditions call for.
The amount of downforce you generate at 200 kilometers per hour, can you mention that? And can you compare it to the 992 GT3?
I have to think hard now because 992 GT3, yes, I think we're doing about 409 kilos, 410 kilos at 200K, not at 300 and something, at 200 with this car in high downforce. And that's about 3 times as much as the GT3 does. And the GT3 is already almost where the last GT3 RS was. So this is really a big achievement. And aerodynamically, we're 40% more efficient than the predecessor. That means the downforce, if the ratio between the downforce and the coefficient drag of the car, for the downforce we have is 40% better. And it's not 40% better than the predecessor, but in high downforce, it would be 40% better.
Wow. That's huge. And can you also use this kind of drag reduction system in terms of aerodynamic braking, probably?
Absolutely. I mean, under hard braking, if the car notices, oh, the driver has to make a stop, as soon as possible, as fast as possible, that thing goes up. Yeah? So it's automated. And just to give you a number, if we brake from 200 to 0, the effect of getting this flap in the upwards position is almost 3 meters, 2 meters 70, something like that, that you have a shorter stopping distance. And 2 meters and 70, or
Yeah, it means something.
2 meters more, and then there might be standing somebody. I mean, it breaks like a devil, really. It's another league. We have the best brakes in the industry anyways, but now with this system, it's on a racetrack, it's mind-boggling how quick the car comes to a stop.
And I think you also worked on the suspension, because under very heavy braking you have the car moving. So did you work on the suspension as well to reduce this?
Exactly. So we were looking for the absolute perfect balance, no matter how hard you brake. And that called for a little differentiation on the front end. So we lowered the pivot points between the lower control arms and the steering knuckle by quite a bit to make the car even more stable, and the car doesn't nick at all. No matter how hard you brake, the car stays always in the same stance, and that means that the arrow from the front and the back will always be even. If a car shifts under braking, you will have more downforce in the back and maybe less at the front, or depending on how the spoilers or the wings work, you will have a shift, and that might unsettle the car, which is not good. So we have to have a stable arrow for the driver to have an absolute reliable behavior of the car. And this has been driven to an extreme on that one.
Can you also talk us through some of the main vehicle dynamics management functions we can find on the steering wheel, Mr. Preuninger?
Absolutely. It's not only innovative in regards of aerodynamics, we have a lot more up the sleeve, and this is interesting for the drivers that like to play around. There's even more stuff to play around with. See the satellites on the steering wheel here? We can influence the dampers. You don't have to lie underneath the car with a mechanic and do click, click, click for compression and rebound. You can do it here. And you can do it only in track mode. So if we're in track mode and we press this button, you see exactly the satellites are mirrored in the screen here. And here we have compression and rebound for front and rear axle. And you can individually adjust and change the car's behavior on turning, on accelerating out of the curve, for different kind of tracks, bumpiness, wet, dry. So you can really, really change the car's behavior big time here.
Is it 9 levels each?
It's 1, 2, 3. It's 4 plus
and
4 minus. More doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because you would get confused.
Yeah, I think it's accurate enough.
And it's so easy to operate, and you can do it while driving. It's really cool. So you don't have to go to the pits, check the car up, and try something again, getting dirty all the time. It's really cool, and you can even use it on the autobahn, I would say. If you want the car to be a bit more complacent, a bit more. Maybe after a track day and you just want to get home and you don't need any bumps anymore, you can really adjust the car quite properly. But it's not all that you can do. It's just one of the 4 buttons. We have another one. We have, for example, let's take the PDV Plus. You can influence the rear diff. It's an electronical diff, and you can influence coast and overrun exactly the same way that I showed you on the PSM. So you have 2 dials here that mirror these here, and you can adjust the behavior on power and overrun on the rear axle. There's another thing. You can traction control. Press this button, and on the other side, because we're on the right-hand side here, you can have it on default, and you can even do it a little bit more forgiving when you're super wet or when it's cold conditions, but you can switch it totally off as well in steps, which I like. I don't want the brakes to do that all the time. Maybe if it's damp, maybe if there's a track that you don't know. Even I'm quite happy with using it, but you can switch it off. You can switch it to dynamic. Dynamic frees you a certain range of possibilities to influence the traction control to go along with, which fits. And you can switch it completely on, like if you would in a normal street condition. You tend to play around with it too much, but it's always when you have a new toy, so you get to know it.
And going through all the controls I can see on the steering wheel, here you have the drag reduction system.
Exactly. That's the button. In a normal Carrera, you operate the voice control of the car. We are doing the flapper thing. For example, if you're on an autobahn and you're going in high downforce mode, because high downforce mode means you can really carry a lot of speed through the corners. You really have to get adjusted on that. It's a new world, really. But it is drag. You don't want drag, so you need to be able to adjust it a little bit. I do it always like that. When I'm approaching a curve where I'm not really sure, do I want to go it at that pace or not? And I said, okay, let's do it, but let's give us the advantage, the full benefit of all the downforce we have. Press the DRS button to high downforce, then the car goes like rails through the curve. But when I want to accelerate again out of the curve, I don't want drag, so I push it again and the flap goes down again. Beautiful. And this is how you can influence it manually, but in dynamic mode, the car does it itself. And really clever. Normally on dynamic mode, it's always high downforce. But when you're on a track, for example, and you enter a straight, the car will notice that because there's no steering angle, you'll be full on the throttle, and then it goes automatically to low downforce to give you the best acceleration. Yes. And when you're under braking, it goes up again, and it feels the lateral acceleration of the car. Okay, we need downforce, and it goes up again. And that's how it works. It's not only the steering angle or the throttle position, it's a lot of more input parameters, and we worked super hard on getting this perfect. And I think it's gotten beyond perfect. It really works.
Weissach package. Can you explain us some of the details of the package itself?
The package is huge. Package is known since the 918, to be frank, and we carried it over in the GT3 RS now and the GT2 RS, as a matter of fact. And the Weissach package that's available for this car, if we start from the inside, has a little bit different pedal shifters. They're bigger, like in a race car. They have a different magnetic feel to them, like in a cup car. They're a little bit shorter, a little bit more crisp. That's from the steering wheel. We have a microfiber on the main dash, so we use extensively the microfiber that we have here, for example. We use it on the upper part as well. We even have, for the European markets, a roll cage made out of carbon fiber. That's another innovation, like the door, that has never been before on a standard road car. You can have it with a steel cage as well, but let me tell you, the carbon cage can take the same loads as the steel. It was really a tough thing to develop, but it really works, and it's a lot lighter, 7-8 kilos lighter than the steel version.
The roll cage
alone. Roll cage alone. And carbon fiber package around the car. There's visible carbon fiber on the front, on the trunk lid. It's visible carbon fiber on the roof and on the rear wing. We have even suspension parts in the Weissach package, like the stabilizers front and back are carbon fiber, and parts of the linkage rods for the stabilizers as well. And the transversal strut in the rear axle, it's a huge part, is carbon fiber as well. So we save 5 kilos alone on the suspension parts down low. What else? And you've got the logos, you've got the Weissach insignia. And you can have magnesium wheels with the Weissach package. And magnesium wheels shave off another 8 kilos of the car's weight, and they have a new design. They're beautiful.
So finally, let's talk about the engine, Mr. Preuninger, because I know you've made some work on that as well.
Lots of mystery about the engine, right? But,
yeah.
We stayed true to the original formula. It's a flat 6. Hidden beneath here, all atmospheric, no turbos. The engine stayed on 4 liters of displacement, not 4.2 and not 4.5 that many people have expected, because we have to keep emissions. The car has to be street legal, and the 4 liter just burns so beautifully, emission-wise as well. And so we stayed at 4 liters and looked at the camshafts. So the camshafts have more duration. They're hotter, I would say, and that creates more power at high RPM. So above 6,000 RPM, this car has even a notch more fire than the GT3 has, which comes in handy on a racetrack. We looked at the cooling system, so the cooling capacity and way to support or to endure heat during hot track days has been improved. And we have looked at the intake system, so the funnels that guide the air into the engine has been revised, and the motor management system, as a matter of factly, as well. And talking about the air, because everything has to do with the aero concept of the car as well, the intake charge of the car. So the air, the process air, we call it, the oxygen you need for the combustion process, enters here. And now we have a different situation than we had on the predecessor, because we have hot air coming out of the front trunk behind behind the radiator. We don't want this hot air here because hot air contains less oxygen for making power. So we had to find a way to keep the hot air away from the intake system. And that's what these fins that you see on the roof
So that's the reason
are
why
for.
those things are here.
Partially, maybe, but they're only part of the equation. Let's start at the front. You see these nostrils here, which look very aggressive, but they have a reason. Because all the air that's exiting behind the radiator is directed through these nostrils to the side of the car.
Yeah.
So if you look at it on the air tunnel, when we have this white stuff flowing around the car, the curve is really like that. So all the hot air exiting the radiator is staying on the side of the car, but here at the second part of the roof, it tends to go in again.
Yes.
And that's prevented by these fins, aero fins here, because when the air is coming up, it is redirected to the rear and left-hand side, so the cooler air is not disturbed by hotter air, doesn't get together with the hot air, and we have a cooler intake charge here. Very important to have this fins here, or to not have them. Even with the nostrils, it's about a difference on a hot day of 20 horsepower.
20 horsepower.
Yeah, because the air is so much cooler when you've got these fins. So never take these fins off, even if you don't like them. They are necessary.
Just mind this.
Yeah, don't take them off.
So this is a level of detail that's just amazing that you usually find on a proper race car. So thank you for giving us this, and thank you for explaining us all of the secrets of the car. It's been such a privilege to have you here in this deep dive, Mr. Preuninger. Thank you again.
It's a pleasure, Fabio. It's not a secret anymore. So
Yes.
the world has to know. So, and we're proud of our new baby, and we hope it will be well received amongst the enthusiasts that really are looking for a track car, because this is really a track car. We made it for the track. It's quite entertaining on normal streets as well, but that's a track day car. Yeah, to get this straight. With all that aero and all that bits, it has to be driven on a track.
Oltre che sofisticate e super tecnologiche, come abbiamo sentito dall'ingegner Preuninger, le auto da corsa devono essere anche molto molto leggere, e in questo la 992 GT3 RS non fa eccezione. Grazie alle numerose parti in fibra di carbonio come il tetto, i sedili, le portiere, i parafanghi anteriori e il cofano anteriore, qui l'ago della bilancia si ferma a 1450 kg. Questo significa che mentre tutte le auto normali ingrassavano di quintali e quintali, la GT3 RS ha messo su soltanto 90 kg di peso. Ed è proprio grazie a questo che il suo spirito è rimasto così com'è, assolutamente fedele a quello del modello originale.